Hello, after we done introduction to the SOP geometry concept, data structures, geometrical attributes, and even some basics of direct modeling in TouchDesigner, I wanted to make a walkthrough TouchDesigner operators in SOP context. So if we open upgrade dialog in SOP context, we have a bunch of operators only structured by two types: generators for dark blue operators and light blue operators, which are kind of filters, or the nodes needed some input SOP data to process. But for my opinion, they have much more logical groups which can help you to understand which operators to take to solve any kind of task. SOP operators in TouchDesigner are quite limited in comparison to Houdini, but we still have a lot of operations, and some of operators are extremely practical. Some of them are very simple. So let's take a look. I've done a page in my Notion to separate all these operations by the logical groups. So I've done two groups of generators, which are basic generators, which generates data from scratch, and input-output operators, which interface SOP context with files on hard drive and with different APIs and with different other context. Then third group is attributes. That's very limited in TouchDesigner, unfortunately, but still we have some operators which attributes which can process somehow geometrical attributes. Then modeling operators, which are basically not particularly limited to polygon or spline operations. Then deformations, which just change the position of points based on different algorithms. Then most mysterious part is character rigging operator. So it's like completely inherited from old school Houdini pipeline and not really well integrated in TouchDesigner. However, it's still possible to make some basic character rigging. Then workflow operators, which are about to build geometrical pipelines or make the procedural modeling. Then spline operators, which are limited to work on NURBS or Bezier splines. Then some polygon operators and some dynamic operators. So let's make our walkthrough based on this selection and start from the first operator, which is add, which I describe as extremely usable. So I will try to make kind of operator snippets from scratch and define and tell a bit how we can use that operator. So add operator, basically most atomic operator in or most low-level operator in SOP context of TouchDesigner and Houdini. Using this operator, we can create points. After that, we have a geometry only containing points, so that geometry doesn't have any primitives or vertices associated with that, and we can use that points as a reference points for different operations. Also very cool that in comparison to the curve operation, basically we don't have curve operation in TouchDesigner. We can create curve using the, for example, using the model operator. where we can, if we open, if I click on the model geometry command, and here I can use a curve tool to create a spline or polygon curves, and that workflow is not really usable because we cannot edit that curves procedurally. So using the add, we can parametrically create points, set their positions using parameters, and then animate or change the position of with parameters programmatically, or using chops, or using scripts, whatever. So that's already very practical approach. Then second usage, that we can take any geometry, let's make for example a sphere, and using add operators we can delete geometry but keep the points using that parameter. And after that we have only points, no primitives, no vertices, so we can optimize the amount of data. For example, if you just want to save the point cloud, and we can also use that points to generate a new geometry using the polygon page. Here we have different methods, two different methods by pattern, where we can define the point order for polygon creation. So for example, I can write 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it will generate the line, polyline, based on this order. That is not completely practical in most of cases, and there are more procedural methods where we can generate polygons by group, and in that case we can use groups. We can connect all points, and we can use group of n points, for example, to connect every second point, and using that way we can generate very nice geometrical patterns. So already that example shows us very nice geometrical structure, and let me show you something more interesting. For example, I can create a circle. Let me make that open arc circle, and let me make more divisions, for example 200 points. Then I go and create add SOP. Then I delete geometry but keep the points, so now I have only points. Then I go to polygons and choose the method by group, and I will choose a method skip every nth point. And now I can increase the amount of n, and that way I can generate very nice geometrical pattern. Here we can also see that it starts to cut the ends, and in order to solve it we can go to the original circle and change the arc angles for values more than 360 degrees. So for example, multiply it by 2, and now it will look much better. And I just go to the post process of add SOP and disable compute normals. So now we have nice geometrical pattern which even work very fast. So let's take a look to the CPU cook time. It's only take 0.075 milliseconds, so it's even real-time usable. So then I can change that n parameter and animate nice geometrical patterns using it. Another approach to use the add SOP is to generate geometry by points DAT. So for example, let me just show the simple example. If we have a sphere SOP, so let's copy and paste that, and for example I want to convert it to DAT using SOP to DAT. Now I have a table with all points and with all points attributes, and then using the add I can generate the points back from that table, just dropping this DAT to points DAT, and using named attributes I can use all that column names to generate corresponding attributes on newly created points. So now we have index attribute, normal attribute, and groups attribute already generated on that points. So using that way we unfortunately cannot recreate the geometry completely, because then we need a polygons table, but I suppose that if I create a polygon table by the primitives, it will not really create the what we need for polygons table. So let me check. No, that doesn't work, but for that we have a different approach in TouchDesigner, which I will show later. Okay, that's some of usable approaches what we can use the add operator. Okay, now I want to show you limit SOP. That operator is in some sense similar to add. Using limit SOP we can convert chop data to geometry. So let's imagine we have, let's say, noise, and let's imagine we have 600 samples, and let's generate 3 channels, like name it TX, TY, TZ. So using square parenthesis X, Y, Z, we can generate 3 channels. And what can we use to convert that data to geometrical positions? One approach could be like make a line and make 600 samples to that line, and then using chop 2 convert that data to positions. But using limit SOP we can avoid these 2 operators and make that directly. So we just drop that to limit, then we can define X, Y, and Z channels, and voila, we have completely the same result. But limit operator is much more usable, because we can not only generate a line from that samples, but also we can go to output and choose different methods. So we can generate a line, we can generate polygon at each point, we can generate primitive circle at each point, we can generate a sphere in each point, polysphere and at each point, which will be much slower, because it will copy sphere to every point. Then we can generate tubes and strips. That's already very practical. So there is built-in orientation. We can define a look at object, which should be one of 3D objects, for example, null. And we can drop this null to look at object and even animate that. Then we can use also additional channels for control radius, radius per axis, colors, and W coordinate for texture. That is already very similar to the approach how we can deal with copy SOP or even with instances. So that's kind of I would say instances in SOP context, so that can emulate the behavior of instances but directly in SOP context on CPU side. So for example, we can add another channel called R for radius and choose that for radius channel, and then we can control the width of that line or corresponding, let's say if we choose a sphere at each point, it will control the sphere radius, etc, etc. So we can add textures, we can even limit the bounds for that geometry. So for example, if I would go with amplitude above 1, it will limit that size. So that operator is quite practical. And if you're already speaking on that kind of different way to convert chop, DAT, etc. data to the SOP context, I want to show you another operator, which is DAT2. That would be the way how we can convert full geometry from the DAT context. So remember the small example I started to show you speaking about add SOP. So if we would have, for example, a sphere and we would convert that sphere to DAT using SOP2, we can convert points, vertices, and primitives, and even details if we have it. Now it's empty. So we can regenerate the geometry back using DAT2 SOP. That's the opposite operator. Then we can add points, vertices, and primitives. That's at least amount needed. And I think it will work only with the polygons method correctly. So if we have a polygon geometry, we can regenerate that back. Also, there are built-in methods how we can deal with primitives. If we don't have a primitive DAT, we can use a method similar to add SOP. We have connect all points every second, third, fourth, and nth point, polygon with n rows, polygon with n columns, mesh, particle system using all points. So for example, another way, if we just use the points and we create a DAT2, we can convert that points to particle system. And here we can define render as lines or render as a point sprites. And third way how we can how we can use that DAT2, we can use that directly on the output on some geometry, and then we can, in that case, we can add float, integer or string, even string attributes to the original points, vertices, primitives or details. So that's, I think, only possible method in TouchDesigner to work with string attributes. Okay, let's continue with our walk through SOP operators.